Welcome back to the table and to Shadows. This is a very glossy book for some reason, a lot of glare and stuff. So the lighting is fine to see, at least based on the viewer, so it should be fine. Anyways, welcome to another episode From the Archive. This is a non-40K episode. I like to go back and forth between a 40K and a non-40K episode to keep things kind of interesting, I guess. And in this episode, we're going to a fantasy setting. Maybe there's a better technical term for the type of fantasy setting we're looking at, but it is definitely not sci-fi and not modern, so I call it a fantasy setting. It is fantastical. We're looking at the Diablo franchise from Blizzard. Specifically, this is the art of Diablo 3. This is the vanilla art, meaning no Reaper of Souls or anything, right? So none of that content's in this book at all. Having said that, I will be talking about my thoughts on the Diablo franchise overall. I'm a huge fan of it. StarCraft is probably my all-time favorite thing from Blizzard, with Diablo being a close second. I love the setting, being that it deals with angels, demons, hell, and heaven, and all that. You also have pretty cool-looking sigils here and circle stuff. Anything that deals with this stuff tends to have those type of circles of power or whatever. Other settings do too, but you're almost guaranteed it with something like this, and I always find those very interesting. So really cool to have that one on the back cover there. If you've never played Diablo, it is in Diablo 1, 2, and 3, and presumably 4 looks also very similar. It's an isometric camera angle, and it's basically an action adventure RPG. RPG. I don't know why I said RP3, but it's an action adventure RPG that you are loot driven by. So you have classes with abilities, but the loot is what really makes you crazy, amps up everything you can do, and it's a lot of fun. I like to say Diablo focuses on fun over realism. Obviously, we're facing demons from hell in a realm called Sanctuary with crazy powers. Realism's gone. But anyways, it is a benchmark game. Much like StarCraft basically is the RTS benchmark of which other RTSs are compared to whenever one happens to come out, which isn't much these days because that style of gaming kind of has fallen to the wayside, unfortunately. Hopefully it makes a return. But outside of that concept, StarCraft from StarCraft 1 through 2 is what things get compared to. It's kind of looked at as like a standard, if you will. And Diablo is the same thing. So no matter what, if you're a loot-driven game, it doesn't have to be an isometric camera angle like Diablo is. Third person, first person, all of it gets compared to Diablo. Fantasy setting, sci-fi, modern setting, it doesn't matter. If you're a loot-driven game, a looter game, the parallels get drawn and comparisons are made to what is considered another benchmark kind of standard. You don't have to like Diablo. I'm not saying you must like it if you like looter games, but it tends to be the one that's compared to for everything. Anyway, this is Sanctuary. It's a very fantasy light, I guess is a good way of saying it, because you aren't really focused on the grandioseness of like the setting in terms of the different cities and territories or anything like that. Honduras and Kyrgyzstan and Westmark and everything. You visit basically these places, but it's not like it holds huge sway over the story necessarily, aside from perhaps being a backdrop, right? Anyways, the way this book works is we have the heroes, which is our player character classes that they showcase, and then they showcase the high heavens, the burning hells, and then the 4 acts, because again, no Reaper Souls, some game assets and cinematics. So I'm gonna go through all the heroes and some stuff, and then we're gonna flip flop, not so much flip flop, but go thumbing through here and there the book as I talk about not just Diablo 3 in this book, but also gush over Diablo a bit. The heroes are fun. Every hero class feels distinct enough from itself to others. Not the best way of saying that statement, but each one feels unique enough and powerful and cool and feels epic. This is I think, a very well done formula for feeling powerful or the escapism. So a formula for power fantasy, that's the word. And with Diablo 3, unlike the prior Diablos, which each Diablo has had different classes, the Barbarian, and then later on, after Reaper of Souls, the Necromancer came back. They're from Diablo 2. But outside of that, everything else is different. You can draw some very serious parallels, but different nonetheless. Before Diablo 3, however, whatever you were, if you were the Druid in Diablo 2, you were a male character. If you were the assassin from Diablo 2, you were a female character. Sorceress is a female, Barbarian was a male. With Diablo 3, they introduced gender. It doesn't do anything in the game really, aside from let you have a better escapism power fantasy by putting yourself more in the shoes of the class you're playing, which I thought was pretty cool. Anyways, none of the stuff is meant to be practical or realistic in its look, from the swords to the armor to anything else. It's just meant to be cool and fun. And when you don't worry about realism, and if that's what gets you annoyed at stuff in Diablo, you're looking at the wrong series for sure. But as long as you don't really focus on realism or care about it, and the game makes no point in trying to, you just have loads of fun here. So here we are with the Wizard. And each one has a different aesthetic. The Wizard, they kind of mention these little blurbs about things. Was meant to be kind of like a rock star setup with the color choice and the shapes and whatnot. We go to the Witch Doctor. The Witch Doctor was a very neat class, kind of like a hybrid between the Necromancer and the Druid, but still different enough in which you can have the Necromancer come back and still feel unique. So that's cool. Just a very well thought out class concept, to be honest. When I first heard Witch Doctor, I'm like, really? And then I was like, oh, it worked out pretty well. So, yeah, there's that. From the Witch Doctor, we go to a monk. And the monk, oh, there's a female Witch Doctor. From the monk, we see, well, not so much see because you don't see an accent, but it has kind of a Russian accent to it, which I wasn't expecting. But still very cool. And even the monk, which, you know, has the classic monk aesthetics that we kind of come to expect, feels suitably epic. That's what I like about the progression of the classes as you level up and get better gear. You, no matter what you are, feel crazily epic and powerful, and you don't feel like you're being outshadowed by the more armored up dudes or whatever. So that's always cool. But yeah, I think Diablo really has a nice blending of power fantasy and just action and fun in terms of the visuals and the classes and everything else. Demon Hunter was one of the ones I played a lot of. Really enjoyed the Demon Hunter class concept. And again, we just had some really cool art for the Demon Hunter and all the other classes. But what really sold me on the Diablo setting is the High Heavens. We first got a real glimpse of that in Diablo 2 with Tyrael. And then here's Imperius. And here we have the Angiras Council. So that's Tyrael. Then we have Imperius, Malthael, Etheriel, and Auriel. Etheriel is probably one of my favorite done aesthetic-wise. We don't see a lot of them. Imperius is also very cool. The High Heavens, the Angels of Diablo setting, are my favorite angel concepts. The Hellguard of Darksiders feel like they borrow very heavily from that, but also try to remain different. And I do like them a lot too, but the Diablo Angels, I love their energy wing tendrilness that they have. It's very, very cool. I just think they really hit the nail on the head with this aesthetic. And this is what really sold me on the Diablo franchise. I was a big fan of it. I mean, I played Diablo 1 a bunch, and Diablo 2 obviously is where I got the DLC'd. But, you know, really cool. But for me, the Angels really brought it all the way home, you could say. And here's Eldruin, really cool sword. And then here's a classic Tyrael pose. And if you just don't like this artwork and everything, you must not like cool things. It doesn't have to be your cup of tea, but it's just awesome. I don't know how else to explain it. I just really love it myself. Of course, opinions vary, but really cool piece of art there. I just really love how they designed the angels, the concept they had going on with them. And I like how the Burning Hells are not just spiky, mutated, corrupted angels. There's a couple of that stuff going on there, but it's very different from Chaos and Fantasy and 40k, where it's just spikier, mutated versions of what you already know. That's not chaosy, you know, the Empire or the Imperium or whatever, right? So, and that's not just what chaos is, I know that, but that's a big stigma about it and kind of a big meme thing. It's like, it's Space Marines with spikes, for example, and for Chaos Space Marines. But the Burning Hells are different, and a part of that is kind of the whole mythos and lore surrounding the High Heavens and the Burning Hells. And I like it. It's not super in-depth and technical and, you know, super crazy world building like we see with Tolkien and Middle Earth or anything else, but it's still a fantastic setting. So, a good job with the Burning Hells and the different visuals for the different Lords of Hell and everything else. Classic Butcher, redesigned. When you get to the acts, each act is a different chapter of the game, basically. A different level overall, if you will, of the game. And they all have their own aesthetic, and it's a nice backdrop, and it's a nice difference. You feel like you're traveling, pursuing, and investigating. That really started with Diablo 2, as you were chasing after the Dark Wanderer. In Diablo 3, it continued that concept. Diablo 1 was solely in Tristram. Instead of going to different acts, you just went further and further down until you descended basically into hell, right? Still all really cool things. So the different aesthetics and the different acts are just a lot of fun. And you get a nice real feel of all that. Like here's Act 2. With Act 4 being in the High Heavens itself, so that's pretty sweet. Really can't complain. Really was cool to see that. Here's some example of the High Heavens. So the art is fantastic. Blizzard concept art, Blizzard cinematics have always been great and always improved to keep up with the technology and be a nice wow factor. It's great inspiration. You don't need to draw everything back to your war game or whatever your main hobby of choice is. If it's fantasy, you don't have to make correlations to elves or paladins or whatever. If it's 40k, you don't have to make correlations to chaos or to space marines or whatever else. But it's there. I'm not going to pretend it isn't. But even if you don't make direct correlation, it's just great inspiration for you to go off and do your own thing on, right? Or it can just be really cool art to gawk at, which is always fun too. Anyways, here's some game assets, what some of the models look like in the game. What I really thought was cool were the weapons, because Diablo's always had really cool weapon art for like when you pick up a weapon in the loot and it's in your inventory, and it looks really cool, especially the unique gear, and it looks awesome. But then you equip it, and it looks like the standard version of itself may be colored slightly differently, because there's a limitation. With Diablo 3 and its engine, how cool the weapon looks is how cool it looks in your character's hand, and it really added to the epic feeling of what you are in the game. So, just want to make a special shout out to that. And aside from that, we have some just the awesome cinematics and showing like the model of Diablo and whatnot, and Tyrael. Just typical stuff you expect from Blizzard. So, with all that said, fantastic series, franchise. I really enjoyed Diablo 3 and Reaper of Souls. This is obviously pre-Reaper of Souls. I don't know how available this book still is because it is pre-Reaper of Souls. Obviously, you don't go spending crazy money for it, but if you happen across an art book for Diablo period from Blizzard, it's definitely going to be a worthwhile pickup, for sure. Anyways, that's it for Diablo 3, the art of Diablo 3, at the very least. I'm looking forward to Diablo 4 coming out. I hear there's a Diablo 2 remaster potentially in the works. I like the Warcraft 3 remaster. I know there's been issues with it, but I got what I expected and what I paid for personally, so I thought it was fine. I'm really looking forward to Diablo 2 if it's true, and I would love a Diablo 1 remaster. I just love Diablo 1, just the resolution and stuff cleaned up and sharpened up, and including a sprint function. Just those two things would be awesome. Anyways, what's your thoughts on the Diablo franchise? Do you enjoy it or not? I think it's a fantastic gaming setting, great for a tabletop RPG. The stuff's pretty much laid out there for us anyway to do that, so that's really cool. I don't know of anything official in that regards. I think if you do a Heaven vs. Hell, it can make a really interesting two-faction war game. That I think would be an awesome miniature war game if it ever happened. But again, none of that stuff's really going to happen. It's just Diablo 4 coming. But I'd love to see more stuff done in this setting. a CGI or live action, either like streaming original or a movie or whatever, would be also pretty sweet. I think it's a fantastic setting with lots of opportunity. Anyways, share your thoughts. Thanks very much for sticking through it. And until the next one, take it easy.